Mr. President, I'm going to be on the floor here with some of my colleagues in the next hour, and I want to thank my colleague from Iowa, Senator Ernst, Lieutenant Colonel Ernst, by the way, Iowa National Guard, for organizing the series of discussions we're going to have in the next couple minutes here on the Senate floor, focus on Military Appreciation Month. Military Appreciation Month. And I think we're all going to talk about how wonderful our military is, and we'll probably do a little bit of bragging about our different states and how we support and appreciate our military so much. Mr. President, you know I'd like to come down on the floor and talk in superlatives about my state, the great state of Alaska. Now, it's true, most senators love to talk about their state and all their superlatives, and that's good. We're a proud state. We think we live in the best, we each think we live in the best state in the country. The facts, though, are that, well, we all believe that, and I happen to think that my state is the best state in the country. Now, in Alaska, when we talk about our military and the support and Military Appreciation Month, we certainly have a large military presence in Alaska. We have about 32 military facilities, 5 major installations. Roughly 10% of the population is either in the military or family members of those in the military. And so I like to say Alaska actually constitutes 3 pillars of our nation's military might. We are the cornerstone of missile defense, so the missiles and the radar that protects the entire country from attacks, whether Kim Jong-un or the Iranians, they all reside in Alaska. We're the hub of air combat power for the Asia Pacific and the Arctic, and we'll have over 100 fifth-generation fighters, F-22s, F-35s in Alaska by the end of next year. And we're a platform, a vital platform for some of America's best trained troops to deploy anywhere and around the world because of our strategic location. And, Mr. President, Alaska also boasts the largest number of veterans per capita of any state in the country. So these are the facts. They're all good, but what's so unique about Alaska, and I would say, Mr. President, most states, is how proud we are of our military, how much the communities of Alaska, big communities, small communities, support the men and women serving in the military. It's almost a part of our DNA in Alaska. Let me just give you one example, Mr. President. I was in a group of community leaders in Delta Junction, that's in Alaska's interior. It's actually near Fort Greely, where we have our missile defense fields. It's right on the outskirts of what's called J Park, which is the biggest training range, air training range in the entire United States. It's actually the size of Florida, the airspace. And so there's great training. We have red flag exercises. Our men and women in the Air Force in particular do some wonderful training there. We're in this community meeting, and some Air Force pilot was flying low and fast, probably broke the sound barrier because there was a giant sonic boom. Shook the whole building, shook the whole meeting room. Now, I would say, Mr. President, most states, that would probably result in people complaining and calling their congressman and senator and, you know, being mad about what the military's doing, shaking the buildings with sonic booms because they're breaking the speed of sound as they're training. And the mayor of Delta just looked at me and said, "Sound of freedom. Sound of freedom." No complaints, just support. Mr. President, let me give you another example. In so many of our smaller native communities, native villages across Alaska, you see what I refer to as special patriotism. Alaska natives and lower 48 American Indians serve at higher rates in the military than any other ethnic group in the country. That is special patriotism, because let's face it, these great American patriots haven't always been supported by their government when they came home after fighting in World War II or Korea or Vietnam. As a matter of fact, Mr. President, there was a documentary film that was produced about a community in Alaska called Hoona, Alaska, in southeast Alaska. It was called the film was called Hunting in Wartime, and it was about how almost every single male high school senior in the late 1960s in these small communities went off to fight in Vietnam. Every one of them. Almost every one of them. That is special patriotism. And this support for the military isn't a recent phenomenon. In Alaska, in 1942, during World War II, Alaskans oversubscribed their war bond quota by 300%, surpassing every state in the Union. But, Mr. President, I just want to mention that so many senators, Democrat, Republicans, are going to come down to the floor and talk about a Military Appreciation Month, as we should. As we should. You know, there's some talk in the country about the 1%, the less than 1%. Well, the 1% I really care about is the less than 1% of young men and women who still today raise their right hand to support and defend the Constitution, to defend our liberty, knowing that it could even cost their life by joining the U.S. military. So, we all have wonderful veterans, wonderful men and women in the military who we support here in the U.S. Senate, and I will tell my constituents, the one thing that we are focused on doing is making sure when you send your son or daughter to join the military, that is the top military in the world, the most ready military in the world, the most capable military in the world. And one thing that we are doing is we are reversing a dangerous trend. From 2010 to 2015, defense spending for the U.S. military was cut by almost 25% during the second term of the Obama administration. 25%. And readiness plummeted. Well, we're changing that, because no man or woman in this country who volunteers to support and defend the Constitution by joining the military should be joining a military that's not at the highest levels of readiness and lethal in terms of getting the job done. So, Mr. President, I'm going to pass this on to some of my colleagues here, but as a senator from a state that communities support our military so much, I just want to thank all the members, regardless of where you live, for the great work you do, and let you know that the U.S. Senate supports you with all its heart and soul.